A quick note before today's episode. While I'm a professor of nursing at the University of Minnesota, this podcast, Midlife Unmasked, is a personal project and separate from my professional responsibilities at the university. This podcast is intended for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered professional medical advice. Please consult your own healthcare provider before making any decisions related to your health and wellness. In keeping with my role as a nurse researcher and educator, I'm here to bring evidence-based information to improve overall health and well-being. It is my goal to be a trusted source of information and to build this community where we can all learn, grow, and share together. With that said, let's jump into today's conversation. Hey Midlifers, welcome to the Midlife Unmasked podcast. I'm your host, Robin Austin, a nurse researcher and educator, and your guide to navigating everything from healthy aging and wellness to big stuff like caring for aging parents, mastering work-life balance, and discovering your next great adventure. So are you ready? Let's do this. Hey Midlifers, welcome to our show today. Today we welcome a very special guest, Dr. Ronda Marie Chakolis-Hassan. Dr. Chakolis-Hassan is a nationally respected pharmacist, public health leader, and equity strategist with over 16 years of experience across clinical practice, pharmacy regulation, and community innovation. She serves as the president of the Minnesota Board of Pharmacy and is a community health strategist with the Human Partnership Alliance. Recently named one of Minnesota's top 100 healthcare providers, Dr. Chakolis-Hassan leads equitable opioid response efforts in Minneapolis and works nationally with the National Association of Boards of Pharmacy to shape the future of pharmacy. A current frontline pharmacist with CVS Health, she continues to champion the essential role of community pharmacists in advancing health equity. We thank you for joining us today and really dive into this conversation. Hey Midlifers, welcome to our podcast today. We are so excited to welcome our amazing special guest, Dr. Ronda Chakolis-Hassan. She is here today to kind of give us her background of her work and also her advocacy work. We are thrilled that she is here today to share her knowledge and all that she's been doing. I've worked with Ronda in the past as well, but excited to hear from her directly and her full story. It's absolutely amazing what you've been accomplishing. And so thrilled that you are here. Welcome, welcome. And kind of to kick us off, I'd love to hear from you, kind of like your, gives us a brief synopsis of what your background is and what led you to what you are doing today.
Wonderful question. I wanted to say thank you so much for having me here today. And then for people who know me, I have to do my usual disclaimers that the views and opinions that I'm going to express don't affect all of the affiliates that I currently work with, ranging from the Minnesota Board of Pharmacy to the university to Human Partnership and whatever. And so I really want to thank you for allowing me to be present with you in this very authentic moment where just a young little girl from North Minneapolis grew up to be a pharmacist and then eventually into public health and policy. So thank you for that introduction and allowing me to be here.
So thrilled you are here. So to jump right in as well, and I love your story and background just because we've known each other for a few years now, and just your personality and how approachable you are and how real and authentic you are, I think is so welcome and so needed in kind of today's society. But you give a life-saving intervention by a neighborhood pharmacist that really sparked your interest in pharmacy. And so can you share some of this early experience that shaped your career, but also your perspective of maybe a pharmacist's role out in the community?
Wonderful question. So kind of to backtrack, I graduated from Minneapolis North High School, and I will date myself in 1991. At the time that I was in high school, we had a STEM program called Sumatech. And so I was very fortunate to have 3 African-American women who had PhDs in sciences. So I would be remiss without saying their names: Dr. Beverly Cotman, Dr. Aletha Halcomb, and Dr. Rebecca Scott. And so you can imagine as a young woman seeing that there wasn't anything I didn't feel I couldn't do in the sciences, but more importantly, kind of back to working with a pharmacist. Before my mother passed away and very early on in childhood, a local pharmacist saw a prescription that my mom received, and she was very allergic to amoxicillin. And so a provider who probably wasn't as familiar with her wrote a prescription for penicillin, and that pharmacist stopped it, and it was very life-changing. If my mother had taken that prescription, more than likely she probably would have died because she had severe anaphylaxis. And so early on, I was like, somewhere in the sciences, I want to make a change and I want to be able to connect with people. And that story just, changed my life. And then again, that pharmacist was also African American, so in the neighborhood. So I was like, yeah, this is something I want to do.
Yeah, that's a great, I think having those, we don't maybe know it at the time, but those role models and those key kind of things that happen in your life that you look back, you're like, oh, that was such a poignant thing. But at the time, it was just kind of a, oh, okay. I think having role models that you looked up to understand that this could be a pathway for me is really also so lucky to be able to have that. I've had the fortunate as well to have some mentors in my life that I think are just, it's so critical and crucial to be able to provide that for young women. So thank you for sharing that as well. And I have to say, give props to pharmacists because I used to work on or took students also to a post-op spine unit or surgical unit. And we had a pharmacist on site on the unit with us. And how many times I walked into the office asking questions like, is this what you're seeing? Is this what is really happening? Just again, that other check along the way is actually so critical for patient safety. So yeah, thank you for sharing that as well. We talked about your roles as being on the board of pharmacy, but as the first Black woman being the president of the Minnesota Board of Pharmacy, you've broken some significant ground, but also there's been challenges in specifically leadership spaces or where you maybe, quote unquote, we don't see ourselves. But how did you draw from that strength and then the direction of role models, such as the ones that you had mentioned, but also Dr. Lorna Newsome as well?
Yeah, so Dr. Newsome was the former NABP, which is National Associations of Boards of Pharmacy. And again, when I use acronyms, I think it's so important that we kind of level set because there's so many of them and they can mean so many different things. But Dr. Newsome was the first African American woman in a organization that had been around for well over 100 years to be president of that organization. And again, I kind of go back to my childhood and how I grew up. I had this very Renaissance kind of lifestyle, but I always saw people. So there wasn't anything I ever felt that I couldn't do. I saw Black women and Black men in places and education and politics and the sciences. So again, it was kind of weird for me to be like, well, this hasn't been done. Kind of even back to for people so they know how the Board of Pharmacy works. That's something you apply for, and then you get appointed, at least in Minnesota, by the governor. Currently, we don't have term limits, and then being elected chair or president, the board members have to do that. And so one day, it was kind of a weird time. Both the executive director position and the Board of Pharmacy position were available. And I had just been working with a mentor who was like, you always apply. Now, obviously, I did not get the executive director role, but the governor did appoint me to the board. And it was exciting. One, because I was younger in my practice, more community-based projects, but really just going in there and having the support of others. And so when I think about my legacy on the board, a lot of times I don't even think about being the first Black woman in this role. I think about being one of the first women in this role to actually kind of understand healthcare for 360, looking at community members, looking at what constituents have to say, and looking at sometimes more of, so often when we're in these roles, we always say, well, we have to have this, kind of looking things differently. It's saying like, well, what happens if we don't? Is our patients going to lose access? Those type of things. So again, my reflection of being here is really the support of community members and then the support of other people in pharmacy who I've actually looked up to in their career. So it's been a wonderful journey.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like you said, there's like the 360 view and being able to have that from like your own personal experience to now your role is as a pharmacist yourself. And then also I think on policy and kind of how that all works and how it does fit together. I think at the time you're going through school or even a community member, you're not understanding all the bits and pieces, but to be able to have that is so critical, I think, in today's world of healthcare and all of the things that are happening. And so thank you for sharing your background. And kind of that leads us to our next question. I didn't really realize what I was doing it, but you have a rare ability to really connect the dots. And so I think it's that the patient, what we had talked about, the payer system as well, public health, your own knowledge as a patient and also a provider. So the systems level that we think of when we think of all these pieces and how they fit together, that big umbrella kind of being able to take that really high level systems perspective. How does it help you to be the advocate that you are in more equitable, effective healthcare delivery systems, particularly for underserved communities?
I think, sometimes when we think about healthcare, we underappreciate lived experience. So like when I talk to young women, a lot of them see me like, oh my gosh, your career, you're so polished and whatever. What I do share with people is the first time I got married at 21. By 24, I had a kid. And by 26, 27, I was headed for a divorce, and that took a process. And during that time, what happened was part of my divorce proceedings, my ex-husband was supposed to keep healthcare. Well, I had a very kind of serious gynecological issue that came up, and I went to the doctor, and they were like, all of a sudden you didn't have healthcare. And this was kind of before the Affordable Health Care Act and et cetera. So then I had to start navigating a system with a young child and figure out, how do I get things paid for? I learned about hospital patient assistance programs and all of these things. So that lived experience, I think, was really foundational, because again, it humanized the experience. So when I go in to say, oh my goodness, well, can I even access a clinic? Well, I know what happens when you don't have access. And then again, I know the challenges that are associated with a payer system and being able to pay. And so what I've done is kind of use my lived experience with myself and what my family members have gone through to kind of even break this healthcare pathway down into a way where we can understand it in digestible language. So early on, we talked about these acronyms, but a lot of people don't know what is a preferred network and what is a formulary. And even when you have policymakers in the room, to really make sure that they understand that who they're talking to. I think sometimes when we get in the room, we start talking a language and we forget. But I think my unique ability has always been is to find a story to connect people in storytelling. So when people start talking about access, I actually share my personal experience with either myself or even my son, who had a lot of respiratory problems and a preferred network at the time, not being able to get an asthma medication for him, and the closest pharmacy being 20 miles away. And because of that, we landed at, the ER. So really just kind of humanizing that, and then really taking that information to patients and constituents and kind of saying, hey, this is how you can affect change. This is how you leverage your benefit. Ask about this thing and asking questions. And I think it really trying to get to the fact that ultimately, I believe at least that we have shared values and that we want to see everybody be the best version of themselves. And sometimes that best version is not the same for everybody, but we want to level the playing field and kind of say, how do we make this best for you?
Yeah. And that's such great insight, I think, as well as you had talked about, which really resonated about like a formulary or a preferred network and some of those terms. And I used to work, and formerly I worked at a payer as well. And so just some of those terms for the general public or just individuals is not as accessible. And so, or what you used to have medication, that all is medication you used to be on no longer is being able to be afforded, or it changed. And so what does that mean? And how do you, like you said, plain language, bring that out to the community to talk about it, to really understand there's ramifications for changing the formulary, or there's ramifications from the policy perspective and also the patient's perspective. And so I think that is so needed, because I think healthcare is so complex. And if people just get so frustrated that you can't get an appointment, or you do have an appointment, it's only 12 minutes or what have you. And so I think being in the role that you're in and seeing what you can see is so, so critically needed, I think, in today's world as well. So thank you for all of that you're doing.
Yeah. And then kind of as a follow-up, I
Yeah.
think it's also to the way we present information, right? So
Mhm.
the one thing that we really have an underappreciation for is health literacy and
Yes.
even literacy levels. So like when you hand somebody a big book with all of these words and these
Yeah.
terms, there are people I know who, you can have a PhD in bioengineering, but not really understand the healthcare system. And what I'm looking for is people like yourself who are doing groundbreaking, innovative work to kind of develop apps or to kind of develop ways that we can present this information to people so that they understand it. Like ideally, I know a lot of people don't want to read. If I had a vision and I had a grant, I would love to just be able to record 2-minute segments where people can listen about the various aspects of healthcare, and then maybe integrate it into an app. Because again, like that big book is so overwhelming and you never look at it until you're in a situation where you actually need it.
Yeah, it's very true. I think every year, when your annual renewal of your health insurance or whatever it is, I get the book from whatever our insurance, and I'm like, okay, well, I'll just set that aside, because I mean, I don't want to read it. And so it's until I have to actually know how much is my deductible or what have you. So yeah, I would agree. I think that's a great idea of the snippets, just kind of, again, like it's a level setting just to make sure everybody has equal access to the information. This is what it means for your health insurance. I think that'd be a wonderful project. Absolutely. So you had talked about your upbringing being a Renaissance style household. Specifically, you're surrounded by educators, activists, cultural icons. Sounds very deeply formative for you. And so how did that environment really shape your worldview and your sense of purpose, specifically now at this point of your career and life?
Yeah, so it was very interesting. I talked about North High School, and an interesting fact is my dad taught at North High School for 29 years. So I went to school where my dad was there. And so in high school, that could be a little awkward. But again, I really kind of thought about everybody grew up this. I had this large, expansive family where we have a family reunion every year. I think we're going on 53 or 54 years where we get
Awesome.
together. And it really was about being intentional. So, where some kids were maybe watching a movie or watching a television show, my parents were bringing us to community meetings, or my parents were bringing us to speakers. And so it really helped me think about one, how do you engage with people, but even learning the rules for engagement, right? A lot of times when we get into these spaces, we don't know that there's a lot of work to putting in a conference or a lot of work into getting somebody to speak. And I remember learning about conflict of interest like at 10 or 11, where we had these conversations, because I would always ask my parents, like, why are these people spending so much time talking about who they work for or who they don't work for? And then going forward, as you see so seamlessly at the beginning, just really making sure we declare that. But also just, I didn't talk a lot. So I did a lot of observing. So the person you see now is the person who talks. But people who knew me during my formative years, I observed. What that helped me do is understand that even though you want to change the world and change everything, you observe and then you engage with people. You don't just insert yourself. In the words of my colleague Clarence Jones, it's like you have to enter the conversation, and it is a conversation. Again, my parents just didn't expose us to people who had the same viewpoints. We went to radically different events, and sometimes it was like, I can see that perspective, or I can see it from another side. And so having that experience was really transformational. One, most kids don't do that. Most kids aren't required to. My parents had a reading list for us in the summer, or we had an event where we had to go sit down with like board member or interview them for lunch. And so all of these skills, like I feel really set me up for success for this very moment that we're in today.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. You're a similar, my parents, I had like math books I had to do in the summer, like I had. So I get it. But I think having those, I think experiences very early on, I think at the time, maybe, as a teenager, I remember some events my parents would have us go to as well. You're like, oh, why am I doing this? What is it? What is the purpose? But now as you look back, how influential that really is to be able to go to listen to people that maybe aren't your viewpoint, but just to hear different things and to be exposed to these different things really does, I think, inform like being able to work with people that are of different opinion. And how do you come to a consensus and how do you come to an agreement? And especially around topics that can be very, I think, personal and touching around healthcare. So being able to have those I think it's so transformative. So I love that. I love having that you did that with your growing up
Yes.
as well. So yeah.
And I also want to add just I really, how you sometimes have these workshops and boot
Mhm.
camps for professional development. I'm very grateful to my mother, Francine Chakolis, who's passed away. But for some reason during my senior year, I had enough credits where I didn't have to go to school. And what she did was show me how she facilitated workshops, what that took, even doing some consulting stuff on her own and preaching like, okay, know your worth and know your value. And even saying, sometimes this looks like a great opportunity, but you don't want to say yes to everything to bring yourself out. So again, like just that whole experience was very, very fundamental to where I'm at today.
Yeah, what an amazing role model, I think, to be able to understand the nuances. And I think, too, many women that I hear from too in midlife, like we never learned the art of saying no. And so you end up being where your plate is overfilling and you're overwhelmed. And so being able to say maybe not right now or to maybe no to is very foreign to some of us as well. But I think it's having the ability to understand some of these things very early on, even in your career, I think are so influential to be able to have that. So amazing. Yeah. Lucky that you had a role model like that. And I love that you had enough credits, but yet here's real life experience we're going to add on top of it as well for your senior year. So amazing skill set that I think we often take for granted that are really needed truly in today's business world in healthcare as well. So I think it's, definitely served you well. So great. That kind of brings us to like the work-life balance that we were talking about and the art of being able to possibly say no. But that balance feels like it's somewhat elusive, especially for those that are having or moving into wanting to have some high impact careers. And you've described imagination and curiosity as essential tools for your well-being. So how do you protect your creative energy? How does travel really nourish both your personal and professional life?
Wonderful question. I think too goes back to that foundation. Growing up, I thought we were rich, like in a different tax bracket. I didn't realize my dad was a high school teacher, my mom, a university professor, but my parents gave us the gifts of experiences and promoted self-care early on. So every year, a lot of times I didn't know until I got older what it took that my dad would take on a part-time job. My mom would take on extra consulting role. We would have these experiences. So in second grade, I spent the summer in Europe thinking, we were rich, but we went to go visit my aunt. And, your parents will remind you of things in a nice way. So I'll date myself. This is the time where you could take the boat across the English Channel. And again, I'll date myself. There's a show called The Love Boat. And so my mom there were six of us. So 4 kids and 2 adults, 6 of us going to Europe. And as a kid, you don't think about it. But I was like, why are we sitting on the deck? This isn't the Love Boat. And my mom was like, well, first of all, do you all have Love Boat money? Second of all, second of all, you're getting an experience of a lifetime. And she actually broke it down without really scolding us. And I think that was the thing that I give my parents credit for, is really talking to us, not at us, and saying, okay, let's do the math. For you all to be in this cabin and we wouldn't have to be there very long, it would be an extra, we'll just say like $300 a night per person. Well, if you take that away, that's going to be a lot of money for stuff that you don't get to experience. And so that was very, very eye-opening. So that seed was kind of planted also kind of when my mom took this fellowship at Harvard, where she made them take the entire family. So we spent the entire summer out in Boston. We didn't have a car, but my parents, and again, my dad being a history teacher, he was in a zone where he was like, I'm going to give you experiences. We're going to take these things around. So really looking at the difference between sometimes what they talk about self-care Saturday and maintenance. So I don't see a massage or a facial or getting my hair or nails done as self-care. I see that as maintenance. Self-care is more the travel, the engaging with people, and then really getting back to saying, I think so often we focus on no. My threshold now is tell me why I should say yes. What is my impact going to be? Because my baseline now is always no. It's like, oh, I have this wonderful opportunity to speak with Dr. Robin Austin on her podcast about midlife, or do I go do this other stuff for pharmacy and things that I've always done? And it's very easy for me to say, well, I've always done this pharmacy stuff. So I'm going to stick to my no, but this is my yes. And this is the reason why, because not only does it feel like a wonderful opportunity, but it also fulfills me. And I think sometimes we have a hard time saying, yeah, no, this doesn't really fulfill me. And it's not giving me that balance of the things that I need. The other thing for me I did was I made a huge career shift. I worked for one of the payer systems for 16 years of my life, realized I was not in a role that I wanted to be. And then finally was like, oh, wait a second. Why am I saying yes to this? So it's just really for me the power of yes. But in travel, like I have the opportunity to eat. different foods, kind of see the healthcare systems from different perspectives, and then really tap into my undergrad degree, which is history and religion, and kind of see things from a 360 in that standpoint. So those are the things that, as you can see, I can have a lot of energy. Sometimes people are like, I don't know how you do it. When you're passionate about something, it's not work. And when you start with a no and then make people move you to a yes, that also really is a game changer.
Yeah, I love that. You just reframed my whole thought and idea around self-care, because I think it is the finding the things that nourish you and saying, and tell me why I should say yes. I'm going to be leading with that from now on, because I'm always, well, I don't think I should. And then I have this like a laundry list of rationale of why I'm saying no. But I think I'm going to flip that and say, tell me why I should say yes. I just think the idea of that fulfillment of self-care is really very deeply personal. And like you said, it's not work. It's because you're so passionate about it. And obviously I'm a learner, I'm an academic. And so finding new things too that I'm learning about really truly nourish me. And that is like my self-care in a way, because I get to explore new things and find new ways to reach people, such as this podcast. And so thank you for saying yes to my podcast.
Yes, absolutely. It was an easy yes, by the way.
Okay, good. I think that reframing is so critical, because it's like, oh, now what do I, there's so many things that are bombarding us all. I'm thinking of myself. And so how do you say no eloquently, but I'm flipping it. That's my new mantra now. Tell me why I should say yes. And so I don't know how my boss will feel about that, but that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of with the self-care thing, I think, we do have this mainstream media that will tell us what self-care is. And so for me, like if I could go to a conference and meet new people and learn new things and then kind of pair it with a day trip to experience food in the local culture, that is like awesome for me. Like I'm not let's have brunch and mimosas and sit that. So I think that's the other thing is really, I love what you said, is taking that time out to say, what does self-care look like for me? And then really making sure that from a health perspective, we distinguish maintenance from self-care. So maintenance is going to the gym and the chiropractor and all of those other things. Self-care is, I think self-care should be fun and it's very individualized. So
I agree. And I think it allows people, like you said, kind of going back to that creativity and curiosity. Like if you've always been curious about something, dive in, or it gives you an outlet to be creative. Maybe you paint, maybe you write, maybe it's, it's one of something along those lines. Or you like music. It's allowing yourself that space and time to be able to really truly nourish what you're passionate about. And I don't think we allow ourselves that enough, because I think we lump it into, I better go to the gym, or I better sit and try to meditate, or what have you. And so this is just a whole nother reframing of it, which I think people are also looking for right now, this stage too. And so another question, kind of moving into thinking of academia, and you have told students, so one test doesn't define you, one outcome doesn't define you. And that's a really, I think, powerful message. I think that hit for me as well, because I tend to focus on maybe some mistakes I've made or things that didn't work out. But I think it's a powerful message specifically for midlife women, and taking this time to reimagine careers and what's happening in maybe some of their finding their purpose, I guess I would say. And so what advice would you have for women at midlife that really feel that this is potentially a call to pivot, a lead, to re-enter new spaces where they maybe didn't see themselves?
wonderful question. Like, I think if you had asked me this even 2 years ago, my answer would have been different. And I think it's what is failure and what is success, right? And so I can say for me, I failed myself while maybe I was trying to climb professionally. And then also I was trying to climb professionally in a way, in an area where I wanted to innovate and I wanted to create and I wanted to connect with people in a different way. And having those constraints really just wasn't working for me, but it also affected me where it was like, well, why can't I fit in here? Or why can't I do these things? And really just having the fortitude to say, I don't have to fit in everywhere. I think if we would start people early out to say, tell me what makes you happy. Tell me what makes you tick. Tell me, how do you feel when you have to do these things, and really tap into emotions and what have you. This is where you're going to be spending your day. So if this is like a place where you're doing it just for money or just doing it for all the accolades and that other stuff is not there, I will tell you, after years at times, you will feel like you're literally starting to die. And then you couple that with some of the biological changes that are going on, that one, we just really started talking about, like menopause, and actually started treating it with, hormone replacement in some cases. And then even, complementary and alternative things that honestly, we don't have to wait till we get to this point. And kind of goes back to what I said about maintenance. If we incorporate that maintenance, it won't be such a hardship. But just from my personal level, I can tell you probably I wasn't what you would say a standout student at the College of Pharmacy. They will probably tell you I was one of those people who had probably made myself a little bit of a target, in the sense of, well, why do we take amoxicillin twice a day for 10 days? Where's the study? And people are like, oh my gosh, it's going to be a rough one for this person. And so even using that as an example, knowing where you're aligning yourself, right? So we're looking for careers, and some people say, I've always wanted to work here. Well, have you looked at the value and the organizational culture and whatever, and kind of checked it against yourself? And then you be like, well, wait a second, you're going to be miserable here. And it's okay to say that maybe that's not for you. But I think so often women, we define our successes and failures in like the scorecard. Like, did I get a 90%? How did I do on this test? And when I tell people one test doesn't define you, like, I can tell you right now, I teach at the university. Nobody's going to care what you got in my class. They're going to want to know how you act and what skills you have. Again, I had some personal issues during pharmacy school, car accident, went through a divorce, loss of several loved ones, like watching my aunt be in hospice, my dad getting in a car accident. Like, you cannot literally making all of this stuff up. And by some people, me taking the time, what I did was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to do a fellowship, put this pharmacy stuff on the back burner, and then come back to it. Really just gave me an opportunity to see things differently. And again, even I don't see things as failure unless you're failing yourself as a person and you're not being whatever. I think were it not for all of those experiences, I wouldn't be here in this moment, but I also wouldn't be able to help advocate for people in spaces where I'm at now, from healthcare to academia, what have you, without that lived experience. And really just understanding, after being with people who are at end of life in my family, not one person has ever said to me, I wish I would have worked more. I wish I would have tried to achieve this. The thing that I hear people say is like, I wish I would have taken that sabbatical or that leave, or that spending that time with my kid and not missing a game, and really saying, hey, is anybody really going to die if I don't take this meeting right now? Tell me why I should say yes. And I think if we go back to that and say yes to an event, I'll give you an example for myself recently. I could have went to DC to accept an award this past Friday, and I don't know where this is going to end, but like Friday, the 26th or whatever of September. Well, my friends were getting married on the 27th. This was a couple. The gentleman was my first intern. The young lady was my former pharmacy manager, and I just kind of did what I normally do and interfered in their lives and said, I think you guys be great together. And was kind of like a little bit like over insisted. They actually talked about it during their wedding. So Al and Lisa just have been remarkable. But it was like, yes, they're only going to get married one time. It's going to be this one moment. And I was like, I just can't say yes to going to get this award at DC, even though it was a wonderful opportunity and accolade in a way to network. But again, it's about setting boundaries. So people now, when they see me, they're like, well, I know family and friends are important to her. And if it interferes or bleeds over, then she's probably going to say no. And so not even feeling guilty about that. I think so often we think that this is, in the words of Hamilton, my shot, my one shot. There isn't just one shot. And whatever's going to happen for you is going to be. And it's those times when you don't necessarily make the mark that are your greatest opportunities. I can tell you again, me not making the mark with my first marriage, me not making the mark necessarily with school, me not making the mark with some other things has really put me here in this very moment that other people would be like, oh my gosh, you failed these tests. No, they don't even define me. It is those those misses that have allowed me to be here and allow me to smile and be passionate and be present with people. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. So that's kind of a long answer, maybe a little bit longer than you're looking for, but that's my answer and I'm sticking with it.
No, it's perfect. I really truly think that we don't give enough credit to sometimes twists and turns that we may face. And really, truly, it's all part of the journey. I always marveled at people who I thought they had this linear pathway for their career and their success, because I don't feel like mine has been that way whatsoever. But truly, I just, that's my journey then. Like, that's my way of, I wouldn't be here today either without what I've been through. And so I think it's a great reminder that certain things just don't define you. It's really, and I love the idea of, I didn't fail only if I'm failing myself and not listening to myself, and really what I'm passionate about and what's going to make me fulfilled. And that may change and shift over time as well. Like you said at the beginning, my answer probably would be 2 years ago would be very different than how I answered it today as well. And that's okay. And I think a lot of times we feel like this is how I've said it. This is what I'm going to be doing. And therefore I just must proceed. But we have the opportunities to reshift if we wanted to. So thank you for that reminder as well. It's a great, I'm getting all these awesome tidbits. So thank you so much. As we kind of wrap up I have one final question that I'd like to ask our guests. And that is, what is one piece of advice that you would give to every woman entering her 40s and 50s to prepare for a vibrant and empowered life?
Wonderful question. And kind of I need to circle back. Like, I also have to say this too. And I think it's just about being transparent. So I'm a very transparent leader in the sense that I recently got remarried to like my best friend. And so also having a partner or also having people around you. Hi, Julian. Uh, it's so important. And so again, I think sometimes like we forget that sometimes we just even want to play and have fun. So kind of goes back to that question with what you're asking. And I think I always say, again, we feel like we're not winning if we're not checking all of these things. So many women now I know are responsible for caring for multi-generations, right? But they forget self-care. The organization that I was working with for 16 years, mom's sick, my own health issues, all kinds of things. I didn't take a leave until I was on my way out. I had to hit bottom. Leaves are a great tool to help you reset. And a leave doesn't always have to be as dramatic as like a formal FMLA leave. But I do tell women, take it when you're going through sometimes these menopausal changes and you're adjusting meds and you're not sure how it's going to work, and take the leave so you can take your power. And then when we say take a leave applies to sometimes friendships, sometimes organizations, sometimes different activities that we've been. I think sometimes I grew up with that thing that women can have it all. You know, you can bring home the bacon and fry it up in a pan and do all of these other stuff. I think that's crazy. We have division of labor in my household. My husband is actually the cook. I don't want to cook because he's better at it. And again, understanding like nobody's going to fault you for saying, hey, you know what? I don't have to be on PTA, but what I can do is I can show up as a supportive parent. I don't have to be on a board, but what I can do is support these organizations and just making sure you constantly reevaluate. And so for me, taking a leave from an employer allowed me to really say, I probably need to leave some of these organizations and really start saying, even what I do now is, how can I support your efforts with these constraints? So a lot of things that I'll do is, hey, I love now recording supportive video messages to say I'm there in solidarity with you. However, my life as the way it's set up, I can't be there. The other thing is, even when I try to teach students, is don't explain. So when you're holding that, no, don't explain, like appreciate the opportunity. I can't just kind of have your standard language. Sometimes I tell people now, hey, I'm currently booked. I can revisit that in Q1 of 2026. And people are surprised. But when you start explaining yourself, you start explaining away those boundaries. And I think sometimes for women, we feel so guilty for saying, I can't do this because of this. No, we just can't do it. But think about when you're saying no to all of those other things, how empowering and how wonderful it feels to say, I am so happy I said yes because it does this for me, or it helps my kid see different things. And for those of us who have kids, they really watch what we're doing. And so even telling them like, hey, sometimes you don't want to be invited to every party. tell yourself why you should go. Or even if you're having those doubts, and I heard you say it early on, you're like, oh, I don't know. That's called instinct. And instinctively, when you're in that space where you're like, I don't know how I do it, I found when I've been in that space, it takes me so much work to be present. It's like double dipping. Whereas like having this conversation with you, it certainly right now has been the highlight of my day. We could talk forever. But again, it's like, oh my gosh, it feels so great to say yes. And so in summary, I know I said a lot there. Leave applies to relationships, employers, organizations, but then really just holding on to that power of yes. And then again, just find out what fuels you, what makes you happy. For people who know me, I'm a professional eater. I love to eat. So when I eat and I travel, I make sure that it's really good and it's about the experience. It's not at necessarily a fancy restaurant, but it's like, oh my gosh, I wanted to always try this place. That I make it an experience? So really, it's just finding you, but don't lose you. And I know a lot of times it's easier said than done, but look at what defines you and what makes you happy. And then I tell you, once you do that, you can start measuring success from that point. And then not really using the term failure. I see failure for me, it's been an area of opportunity, but it's been transformative. And it's what got me here to this moment. And I would say I'm not sad about it at all because I can share my experience. But again, I'm here. Here having this conversation with a brilliant, and I mean, I don't think we do that to each other either, is a brilliant woman like yourself who was looking to bring other women along, give them a voice to kind of talk about some of these things that are a little more challenging. Everybody can say, oh my gosh, I went to this school, I did this. But sometimes we don't do that gut check and that deep dive. And so I thank you for understanding that we need to hear that as well.
Yeah. Well, that's such great advice. I love that. And I love what you said about saying no and to stop the explaining, because I find myself doing that all the time. And I heard, and maybe you've heard this as well, that no is a complete sentence. It's okay. And you can, and I think having your standard script language, like you said, about like not right now, maybe in fiscal, the Q1 or what have you, whatever your language is, but tell me why I should say yes, and fulfilling and stepping into that space. But I think it's so critical to start listening to our gut and our instinct. If we're like, I don't know, this and that, and you're trying to rationalize why you're going to do something because you don't want to say no, that is your instinct. And I think that we don't listen to that enough. And over time, I think that's such a pattern. Like we get used to not listening to our instincts and not listening to which is, so I think the antithesis of what we should be doing, especially at midlife. I think that it's really now is the time to stop. Like you said, if you need to take a leave, whatever that may look like for yourself, and to really take the time to redefine. So I such great words of wisdom, and I've taken so much from this conversation. So thank you for saying yes. Thank you for your insight and wisdom. And I'm just so proud of all that you've done and you've accomplished. I cannot wait to see what comes next for you. So thank you for coming today.
Yes. And then just one last thing that I just started doing. So I always like to share my little life hacks before we end, is meetings. So often, and again, I'm sure you've been there, you've accomplished a lot. People are like, I want to know the secret to success. I want to meet with you. I now have created a meeting template. So I have a meeting template that I share with people to say, tell me how much time you're looking for. Give me the 3 topics you want to talk with before we meet and some dates. And I have found that people, when I do that, have actually put the pause on meeting with me. They were like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. And so really just kind of saying, hey, you know what? This is really working. So this is my new life hack. So even when students meet with me or whatever, that way, and sometimes what I've even said is, hey, you know what? I am not the best person for you for this. Let me refer you to this person. And when I do, this is what they'll be expecting. So that's my last little hack. I could talk forever, but this hack has just been life-changing. And again, I just want to thank you so much for seeing me, so much for believing in me, but really taking this journey with me over the last couple of years, and then using your platform to allow me to share, some of the not so polished moments of my life so that other people can realize, you know what, again, that one test doesn't define you.
Yeah, it's so true. Well, thank you. You're such an inspiration to me. I so look up to you. So thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
That's a wrap on this episode of Midlife Unmasked. I hope you found inspiration and a few key takeaways. If today's episode resonated with you, please be sure to share it with someone else that could also benefit. And don't forget, this podcast is here for you. If you have a topic or a question you'd like us to explore, please send it our way. Your feedback helps us reach even more listeners on this shared journey. You can find us on social media and our website, midlife-unmasked.com. That's midlife-unmasked.com, and the links are also in our show notes. Until next time, keep unmasking your potential, embracing the possibilities, and living your best midlife with courage and confidence. Take care and see you next week.